Hello and welcome to our presentation on sustainability in the airline industry. We're Group 4. So starting off, we're going to do a quick analysis of the practices. So we'll dive into the effectiveness of each based on our past research. So the three practices that we chose were SAFs, operations, and CORSIA.
Our first practice is SAFs. First of all, SAFs are a renewable fuel source made from biomass or biological waste oils blended with fossil jet fuel. SAFs are effective because they cut overall emissions by 80% and do not require any engine modifications. However, they do cost 2 to 3 times more and will require advancements in production and research development. The use of SAFs is ranked as the most important practice because conventional jet fuel consumption contributes to roughly 99% of an airline's total emissions. And given that SAFs cut emissions by up to 80%, the widespread use of SAFs would have the greatest impact on reducing the industry's emissions.
Next up, we looked at the operations, so primarily focusing on 3 areas, which are creating efficiencies across routes, capacity, and weight. So for routes, we looked at if there's a route with other means of transportation as well, and then decreasing flight times by improving on-ground operations. Then increasing capacity, so maximizing capacity on existing flights so as not to do redundant routes. And then decreasing weight, so even small weight reductions can have a large impact on CO2 reductions. So one very impressive statistic is a pound loss in weight equals 53,000 pound reduction per year in CO2 emissions. And airlines only use 82% of the capacity that is available, so there's a lot of room for improvement. We also chose to look at CORSIA, which is the UN guide for offsetting for airline industry. So it aims to keep rates steady at the levels seen in 2020, and it allows for airlines to standardize the practices. So it is voluntary until 2026, becomes mandatory in 2027 across all airlines in all countries, and is expected to reduce 2.5 billion tons of CO2 by 2035. All right, we'll do an airline sustainability analysis now.
The Air France-KLM Group website mentions that their strategy for sustainability is to reduce their environmental footprint by improving their operations and processes, partnering and innovating in the supply chain, and by mobilizing their staff and the industry, highlighting that they aim to be the leaders of sustainability within the industry.
Within Lufthansa's financial documents, they mention how corporate responsibility is. They mentioned their corporate responsibility, and it showcases how important it is to adapt to changing consumer preferences, as sustainability is at the forefront of the aviation industry now.
Yeah, so just looking at the operations of these two airlines, Air France-KLM had a revenue of $23 billion in euros last year, decreased this year. They served 93 countries across 554 aircraft. Lufthansa is a slightly larger operation with $36 billion in euros of revenue last year. They serve fewer countries at 80, but have a larger fleet size of 763.
Some of Air France-KLM sustainability targets for 2030 is that they aim to reduce their overall emissions by 50% compared to 2005. They aim to reduce their non-recycled waste by 50% as well, and have zero emissions of ground emissions.
Lufthansa's 2030 targets are to have zero emissions on the ground by 2030 within their primary home markets of Germany and Austria. And they also want to operate quieter aircraft, as they identified noise pollution as a significant area that the airline industry can improve. And they want to do this by adhering to the ICAO Chapter 4 standard of reducing their airline fleet by 10 decibels.
Some of Air France and KLM's current initiatives of sustainability include the memorandums signed by Air France and Shell, mentioning that their airline's flights departing from San Francisco will have a blend of SAF fuel starting in 2020. Also, KLM made a decade-long commitment to purchasing an annual 75,000 tons of sustainable aviation fuel. Some of their operation initiatives include a proactive involvement in SESAR program, contributing to the targets of the Single European Sky, directed at a better management of air traffic. KLM's optimization efforts resulted in an additional CO2 reduction of 2,860 tons. And also they allow their customers to offset their flights, and KLM's customers have offsetted 175,000 flights.
Lufthansa, on the other hand, is extremely focused on SAF, and they've been the world's they implemented the world's first long-term testing of SAFs, and they've recently ramped up production in 2019 as they declared intent of increasing future production. Within resource management, Lufthansa is currently trying to implement electric propulsion technology as airplanes deport from Frankfurt Airport. And they've, as stated before, they're very focused on noise pollution, and they also hope to achieve the A-Care research goal to decrease noise emissions by 50%. And they're also looking to modernize aircrafts, as they've identified that more fuel-efficient aircrafts can increase CO2 savings by up to 25%.
So now delving into their financial outlook, CEO Anne Regale of Air France has mentioned the struggle between sustainability and profits, and how Air France has gained social and sustainability leadership value in this industry that is unrecognized monetarily. But from 2009 to 2017, their earnings before interest and taxes had remained around zero. They had had lots of debt at that time compared to their book value of their assets. So financially, they're not positioned greatly. Their net investing cash flow and capital expenditure has been increasing since 2015. And since 2015, their net income has been positive. So perhaps we're looking towards a better future financially for Air France. The industry in general has a negative outlook because sales margins are decreasing due to competition with high-speed railways, especially in Europe, because they're great environmentally and really fast. Also, possible carbon pricing policies could hurt heavy-emitting airlines. This could give KLM, Air France, a little competitive advantage because of their significant investment thus far in sustainability. There's very high fixed costs in this industry, like planes and infrastructure. The variable costs are also insanely volatile, labor and fuel being the most common examples. This all leads to a negative industry outlook where Air France is positioned somewhat poorly financially, but they have immense sustainability and social value that could help them survive in the long term.
In many ways, contrary to Air France, Lufthansa has actually had a very successful run from a financial perspective, being profitable 13 of the past 15 years, and continues to have a strong grasp of the European market with it and its subsidiary airlines. And with the latest bailout due to COVID from the German government, Lufthansa is confident that it can return to profitability by the next year.
Great. Now we'll move into some of the rankings and the takeaways due to our breakdown. So how we ranked our initiatives? Well, we looked at all our previous research, which we dove into. Then we compared the two airlines, and then we took into account outside factors to make sure we're getting the entire picture considered.
Air France and KLM are doing better than Lufthansa in a couple aspects of the industry. First of all, in the SAF part, their industry, KLM is the industry leading investor of SAF and are developing a plant dedicated to producing SAF with Sky NRG, a leading developer. Air France is currently offsetting 100% of their CO2 emissions in domestic flights, and Air France KLM has reduced its overall emissions by 30% compared to 2005. Good progress on their goal for 2030.
On the other hand, we've identified three core components that Lufthansa is doing much better in, and it's within transparency, innovation, and implementation. And within the transparency aspect, many of Air France's environmental impact statistics are available for the public, but Lufthansa has created their 2019 fact sheet, and it's visible to the broader public. And then secondly, within innovation, Lufthansa has been very innovative, and they've been ramping up studies to identify new practices, new best practices that they can implement to decrease their environmental impact that they have. And so whether it be identifying that the vortex generators are the cause of noise pollution, or trying to speed up declination times to decrease to increase efficiency, they've been at the forefront of this industry. And then within the SAF implementation, Lufthansa has recently signed a joint declaration of intent, and they're going to be ramping up production as they move up in the airlines.
So looking at some outside factors for Air France, they partnered with SkyCell, which provides hybrid cooling technology for containers to reduce cargo emissions by around 50%. This could be really prevalent because of COVID pharmaceutical shipments. They're recognized as a sustainability leader by the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for the past 15 years consecutively. There's some proposed aviation taxes in France that could likely put financial pressure on the industry. Chief Executive Ben Smith has mentioned their number one way to improve their environmental footprint is to buy new planes, and they could lose some competitive advantage because of these taxes. They also are now employing Skybreath data analysis software to use AI and machine learning to save fuel consumptions by up to 5%. Some firms already use this, but not Lufthansa. Lastly, the French government gave COVID loans to bail out Air France and conditioned those loans on their sustainability in the future, which adds another level of insurance that they will work on sustainability long in the future, whereas Germany, not so much.
As Zach said, the government factor is, of course, very important in ensuring that Air France was able to meet their goals, while Lufthansa is given more room to have emissions, although the climate-friendly societal trends are still important.
All right, and then due to our analysis, we picked the winner as being Air France. So from a by the numbers approach, Air France pollutes less at every scope of measurement, and then also takes more effort to offset their emissions compared to Lufthansa. And another confirmation to our ruling was that Air France is more efficient per passenger per kilometer, which is an important metric to see how efficient an airline truly is in its operations. The one area in which Lufthansa does come out ahead is economic efficiency, where they're able to generate more revenue and more profit for each carbon in emissions. And that just about wraps us up. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We can be reached at the following emails below, and have a wonderful night. Now, here are some sources too.